Okay, since we started a little late, I'm going to skip that little break moment. He doesn't have a chance. Right? James 1:2, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If you've been a Christian for a while, you know this verse. And I think hopefully we understand and appreciate that, what I said at the outset, that God, I mean, we live in a fallen world, so God doesn't remove us from that. In this world you will have tribulation, right? But be of good cheer. Why? Because he's overcome the world. There is a time on the other side of our death where there will be no more conflict and tribulation and tragedy and all that kind of stuff. But for now, even as we have the Holy Spirit, even as we follow Christ, it's part of it. And the reason why it's still part of it is because God wants to deepen our faith, right? When you and I especially have to throw up our hands at some point and say, I can't do this, I don't know, and we really turn to God in real desperation, those are those moments where you deepen your faith, right? When you realize, no matter how capable I was in X, Y, and Z, situations, I'm just fooling myself to think that I can manage without God. Okay, so God wants us to have our faith tested, and what we're saying here in this course is that depending on our totems, our faith tests come in different ways. Okay, or to put it in the negative, depending on our personality totem, we tend to flee from certain kind of conflicts that maybe God wants us to deal with. Does that make sense? Okay? And now, I'll say right here that it's important to understand that, because sometimes I'll be down on myself because I see somebody else, and I'm not thinking in terms of totems, and I see somebody else managing the same kind of conflict in a way that I don't want to deal with, and I feel deficient. Like, what's wrong with me? Like, where's my faith in God, right? And then I realize, my totem actually sets me up to actually not relish this kind of conflict, whereas for the other person, a different totem, it's like, that's right in their sweet spot. Okay? So again, it's like, I tell people it's like what happens when I'm out there riding my bike, and it's really easy to make comparisons that aren't true. Okay? So I see somebody, and usually if they're ahead of me and they're a woman, something kicks in, I have to catch up to them, right? and so like, I caught this woman, like she was in full like professional regalia. I mean, she had all the right stuff on, and I'm like, yes, So we ended up, she counted back up to me at the stoplight, and I was at the end of like 25 miles, and I'm almost home. So I'm like, hey, so where are you going? She's like, I'm just starting, I'm doing 90. Right? And I'm like, right, yeah. So she's pacing her, she could ride circles around me, but all I saw was what I saw, right? And that was slow for her because she's just warming up. She just started, and I'm at the tail end. And same thing when people pass me, I always think I'm probably 20 years older than them. Today I'm riding longer than I normally ride. I'm doing 50, and so even though I could keep up with them for the moment, I'll pay for it in the end when they go off on their own merry way, right? And so that's kind of been one of the interesting little epiphanies that I've had as I'm writing. Is my first instinct is to think I know what's going on in everybody else's life, right? And to assume that they also know what's going on in mine. It's like, no, neither one is true. And so I just need to manage what's going on in my life, right? And people are going to pass you, you're going to pass other people, but that doesn't mean squat, right? Because you really don't know what's going on. So when it comes to pursuing our spiritual journeys, it typically means adding conflict to our otherwise comfortable lives. Every person in the Bible that chose to pursue God is an example of this. And so what we're now going to get into is what are the totem-specific conflicts that are likely to trip us up and why. Okay, so these are the things we're really going to stumble. And all right, so if you have your handout, this is where we only put a little bit here on the screen. And we're going to be spending most time, and I'm going to be handing this off to Ryan as soon as I read this little blurb here. The spiritual struggle for a believer is self-righteousness. Beavers feel like they've earned the right to go to heaven insofar as they are fulfilling their duties, and so they may think of themselves as squirrels, cute sinners, as opposed to rats. And bless you, Ryan, for remembering my sermon on rats and squirrels. They may find it difficult to love, in this case, just an example, an LGBTQ Christian, right? Because it's just like, well, I'm not gay, and so, I think I understand what it is to be you, and so you just need to do the right thing, okay? So let me hand it off to Ryan.
So as I'm writing this to Ken, I thought this message was directed towards Ken, and I wasn't thinking directed towards you guys. So I was communicating I don't know if anyone remembers the squirrel story. Okay, you guys do?
Yeah.
I was like mortified when I saw it in the slides. Ken, I don't know if you want to put that
I know
in
that
there.
they remember that.
Okay. And so this is where, in a way, you guys are unfortunate and fortunate at the same time. You're unfortunate because I don't know how 100% accurate is this. What I'm saying is a lot of it is true. I don't know if it's the best vocabulary. Okay, so that's why you're unfortunate. The fortunate part is this is uncharted territory in personality theory. I was like, Ken, there's no books to verify what I'm saying. I'm just writing it down from my intuitive thinking. I don't know. He's like, I read it, it's good. I'm like, like that makes me really uncomfortable. I want to plan more. I only spent 30 hours on this, Ken, so help me out here. I've only asked a few people to verify too what I wrote. So what is your guys' idea of self-righteousness? If you guys tell me what that is, maybe I'll tell you if this is the right word.
Think you're better.
Think you're better.
You're right.
I think that's the right word.
You have the answer.
You have the answer. Right, exactly. Those two are right. I don't know if it's about necessarily think that you're better, because beavers are always in their mind is that whatever they do, whatever they accomplish, most beavers say it's because I worked hard for it. So it's not because I'm better, it's because I worked harder. And in that small sense, I may be better, but I worked really hard for it. And so if people cannot follow this certain doctrine, well, hey, I worked hard at it, so you should too.
Marshall, the self-righteous word gives an element of superiority.
Right.
So
Right.
that's
when I was talking to a friend at, I wasn't thinking it about superiority so much. And on Thursday night, I realized that maybe it would. And so that in that regard, I don't believe that's 100% accurate. It's not that they naturally feel superior, but they have worked really hard, and everyone should too. And my life is a model. You should follow along. This actually works perfect though with your insight on deep analysis. Beaver says I did it, and so should you. So explain to them about deep analysis.
Wait. Which one are you talking about?
About the quote regarding if you have such a high standard that no one could follow, that you're creating a standard in which all lives are created.
Deep change.
Deep change.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about D&D card, Magic card.
Yeah, you remember I threw that up a couple weeks ago, that any organization that holds out a goal that's as attainable, that's impossible actually to attain, like being perfect, promotes deception and lying at every level of the organization, because everyone from the top down and from the bottom up is playing along. It's like, well, no one's saying this is impossible, so even though I'm failing, I have to look like I'm not, right? And when I read that, I was like, oh my goodness, this is the church, right? This is any Christian institution. Everyone's supposed to look like the goal is attainable, and the reason why. Even the reason why you get to have your job in the institution, whether it's as a professor, as the president, as a dean, as a pastor, even as a Sunday school teacher, is because you qualified because you've close enough attained the goal. Okay? So what we end up doing is we promote lying and deception at every level. And so people who are really, everyone struggles with something, and it doesn't even have to be overt behavior. The Sermon on the Mount says, a lot of it is just the seeds of every temptation. It's in every one of us, right? So if you've never cheated on your spouse, but you've ever had lustful thought, you're in the same club, right? So remember, I'm going to really date myself. There's people here that would remember this. Jimmy Carter, when he was president, he got in trouble because he did an interview that was later published in Playboy. So the guy that interviewed him didn't say he was going to sell it to Playboy, but that's what people didn't remember or realize. So some people were scandalized that Jimmy Carter, the Christian president, was actually publishing Playboy. But he admitted to having lustful thoughts in this article. And oh my gosh, right? There was just this uproar from people, and it's just like, that's refreshing, right? Right? But in many situations, that's the deal, right? And so I think sometimes beavers, if you're a beaver, you get kind of caught in that thing that you actually look at your behavior and you kind of universalize it from that, but you're also not even looking beneath your behavior.
So it's like in a beaver organization, one thing that could hinder it is that when they're hiring someone, they might actually say, okay, what's your resume, which is all your wins? And they'll say, oh, what's your other resume here? You know, the one lurking in the shadows of all your losses. I know about that. I remember how you were 10 years ago. And then all of a sudden, you have an organization of people who just never did anything wrong in their life. But if no one did anything wrong in their life, chances are they haven't done anything great in their life too. So you might be in an organization where it feels like, oh, I'm a happy family, you know, let's all get along, but it doesn't do anything great. So that I would say that's the biggest problem for a beaver.
So is that where the question of what are your strengths and weaknesses in interviews always comes from?
It's just that's the most insightful. They want to know how you can be utilized, and actually it's a good question to know how self-aware are you. And how honest. If you give them an answer with your weaknesses and you actually make it a benefit, I really dislike that kind of answer. Did you guys hear Hillary Clinton about that? Oh, there's this interview where it was a debate actually. He asked Obama, you know, what's your weaknesses? And he said being organized. And then he told Hillary Clinton, she said, oh, I care too much. She's like, well, that's not a real answer. It's like, if I knew she was going to give an answer, I would have changed my answer. And then people, I mean, she looked ridiculous because that's what you're supposed to do. But now everyone's doing that, so it's so fake and inauthentic.
Well, so that's like my very first date with this woman over here. Right?
Right.
So I told you this story. I tried to impress her, so I'm just rolling out all my accomplishments, and then 20 minutes later she's like, did I ask you to say any of that? No. So according to that story, you've never failed at anything. And I'm like, oh. Well, this date's not going well. And so she goes, is it, or you have failed and you just don't like talking about it? Yeah, so I got her back, I married her, right? No, but at the time, I thought no one's asked me that question, right? And it's so easy for me, I heard people even from this church go, well, our pastor, he gave up being a dentist so he could be a pastor. I said, no, I failed to get into dental school. Right, I mean, it's just really easy to let the story spin out a certain way. And it's just like, oh no, I hit this wall where I applied. Thank God I didn't get in, right? But at the time, that was failure. That felt terrible. But even to not talk about it anymore as a failure, it spins it.
Right, right.
All right, so you want to take them through this middle section on the handout? Why is it not enough?
The middle, do they have that with them?
Yeah.
Where is that?
Page 2, second paragraph.
Oh.
Yeah, that's your handout. So it's not the slide, it's the handout I just gave you.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Actually, can we go to the dolphin section? And then I will get back to that, though.
Okay.
Usually, I'm pretty good at rolling with the punches, but this one caught me off guard. It was I didn't have my face protected on that uppercut.
Oh, so you want me to talk about this?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So let me just do the Fox since it's in this order.
Oh, yeah, right.
So I told them, I made the slides and I said we're going to have more of the content on your sheets today. Okay. So we'll go over the general things and then we'll back up and we'll go into the detail about why is it not enough that this is a problem area for me? Where are you actually going to still kind of sabotage what God's trying to do? Guys, so for foxes, the spiritual struggle is following rules, especially when the rules seem to inhibit their own personal freedoms that they enjoy. A fox is often seeking stimulation of the senses, which can be interpreted as hedonistic, such as drinking, clubbing, and the like. Unlike a mature beaver who is typically already participating in some sort of organized social construct, a fox might ask, why would God want to regiment or restrict my life? So I would say that the big spiritual struggle for a fox is to actually see discipline and order and following the rules as something not just as necessary, but as beneficial, right? And so they're going to kind of push back against that kind of construct. Okay? Yeah, go ahead.
Regarding now we will go back to the beaver, now that I remember what I wrote down a few months ago. But actually we did cover it already. The reason why beavers do what has been done in the past is because they're the most likely to say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Why? It works. Why mess things up? We could mess things up. They believe things in the past were created for a reason, and it should be done that way over and over again. There's an example in Scouts. How many of you have kids that were in Scouts? Anyone? Yeah. So one of the corniest things in Scouts is to do merit badges. And there's one merit badge they made mandatory, which is family life. And then they said, write 10 reasons why you're important to your parents. I came up with one reason. My answer was, I'm an extension of themselves. I couldn't think of any, and then I went up to the merit badge counselor, she's like, you know, do you take out the trash? I'm like, yeah. Do you wash the dishes? Sometimes. So I don't think that's the reason why I'm important to my parents, though. And so when I was more involved in scouting in the Scoutmaster level, I would just completely change the merit badge. You know, forget it. For family life, we're learning personality theory. and the Scoutmaster says, look, they have a model which you can follow. Read the books. They have this for a reason. I'm like, no, this is so painful. The kids actually have to write 10 reasons why they're important to their parents. Actually, there's only one reason. There's nothing else.
So that's why that kid had a dolphin merit badge.
So that's an example of bureaucracy. I mean, it was done 40 years ago, or 50 years ago, or maybe 100 years ago, and it hasn't changed in merit badge books.
All right, so which of the totems is most prevalent in churches? Right, so put that together with what Ryan just said. Right? Church people are the most resistant to change. Changing the order of the worship service, right? Changing that, all that kind of stuff, because it's not broke, so why fix it? Whereas it actually might be broke for some people, but it's just not broke for them.
And it's not enough for beavers to know, because to do something that's tried and true is a core value of a beaver. A core value of a beaver is to be secure, and secure is in tradition. Why break it? We're breaking our security. We're taking a chance. We're being risky. We know what we got, so if we do the same, we'll get the exact same results. If we change it, we don't know where we're going. It's a core value. For them to change, they have to be mature enough to change that core value. So I'm talking to my friend, we're saying, oh, but this beaver is a high-level beaver. What we're saying is not that they're smarter, that they're dumb. What we're saying is that they are flexible in certain situations, and that's the high-level beaver that we're talking about.
So for example, with, again, church in America, America is going through a huge change, and more people are not into being churchgoers, right? Especially our kids' generation. But even though the beavers in the church and the running the church see the increasingly empty spaces, it's like, but we know this is our tradition. And to change it is maybe to mess it up. It's like, okay, but then you're now irrelevant. Right, so sometimes, and I think that goes to your second bullet point here, is it may not dawn on a beaver that God may have changed the path or the plan to holiness. Okay, it's on page 2, middle of the page. So I thought that was a good example.
Right, I mean, beaver naturally thinks God has a plan for me because I'm born, and that plan is rigid, but that plan can ever be changing.
Yeah.
My cousin is a fund development person for nonprofit Christian organizations. He's done that for 30 years. And he's hired by these small Christian organizations to come in and to do that job. But they don't realize when he comes in, he's going to do an analysis of the organization. And invariably, often the charismatic CEO that founded the thing, and you always start thinking of names in Christendom when there's been a fall of grace. It's usually a fox who's the charismatic CEO, but they have all these beavers in the office. And inevitably, this is the issue, is the problem is everybody's just going along with the show, as you said, because people want to think that everything is okay, and the culture of we're perfect, we're doing God's will. And then the fall from grace comes 10, 20 years later, where it all falls apart,
Yeah.
because the fox is on to
Other things. Right. Right. And, you know, and that's a word to the wise, too, that if you join a church or an organization where it really is a fox at the top, that they get bored pretty fast. There was a pastor that started a church that grew quickly into a mega church up in the San Jose area. And before we hived, we used to bring him down to speak at our conferences and stuff like that. And some of my InterVarsity staff friends were hired by him, and these are like ace, amazing people. And then all of a sudden, he just got bored. Like, he up and dropped it, moved to Kentucky, and divorced his wife. Doesn't even say he's a Christian anymore. Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's an extreme example, but it's like everyone else was a little like, huh? Right? I mean, one of his staff members was all of a sudden the senior pastor, right? And he's like, I didn't sign up to be the senior pastor, you know, what's going on? So they're working through the grief of they put too many, you know, hopes and dreams in one person, and just not understanding that this person is wired not to necessarily sustain something. Yeah. So that's important to know that about yourself.
That's a great point. I'll use that in a second.
Yeah, so the examples here in the middle of the page, for instance, it may have been acceptable for a good Christian to be racist. Okay? It was. People had Bible verses for that. But then now being racist is considered unacceptable today. So that's where like God throws a curveball in the midst of stuff like that. And then, you know, his example of the whole gay and the straight community, I think that's very relevant for us, obviously, right now. And I feel like that's another way of understanding why this CDP process is tough for the beavers in the church, because they're saying, why are you messing with the status quo, right? And you know, the simple answer is because the status quo excludes and hurts certain people. Right? Just like the whole racism thing did before. That doesn't mean we know exactly where we're going to come, but it's like, but keeping the status quo so that nothing changes, it's actually, I think, thwarting the purposes of God at some point. Even in the lives and the hearts of the people for whom this is difficult, right? Because conflict will again reveal things that God wants us to see. And then you brought up the story of the two sons in Luke, the prodigal son and his older brother. Clearly, the older brother was the beaver, right? I deserve a party. I worked hard, right? Blah, blah, blah. And then it also produced a reaction and a criticism and a judgment against his prodigal brother. Of the two of us, clearly this lunkhead hasn't done anything to deserve the party that you gave him, okay? And so now I'm even questioning your intelligence as my father, because an intelligent father would clearly see the obvious one who's done all the stuff that's necessary. Okay? So I thought that was good to see that. We're not going to get to epiphanies yet. All right, so we talked a little bit about the fox, so are you ready to talk about the fox on the sheet?
So
that's on page 4.
So one thing that a fox does struggle with is hedonism, right? Since they are the senses, they are the eyes, they are the tongue, they are the ears of the body. They want to have fun. And there's nothing wrong with having fun. It keeps them going. They want stimulation. So at one level, I don't know if this is true, but I imagine the stereotype of the people on ADAP, a lot of them are foxes. Maybe they're dolphins that have gone emo on us. But what is the feelings, Ken, on when you're talking to the people, the patients in ADAP, what is their feedback on going to church, their natural reaction towards church?
It's boring.
It's boring. Why is it boring, though?
Because we're boring. Well, I think because there's not a lot for the sensory stimulation.
Right.
Yeah. So they'll go to the Native American Sweat Lodge, right? So they do that once a month, and I went with them, and that is a sensory stimulation. I mean, they're cooking you. Yeah, if you've ever done it. I mean, they have this half dome hut that they make in the native style that's bent over branches, and then they cover it with layers of wool blankets. And in the middle, inside, is this pit that they put lava rocks in that they heat outside till they're glowing red, right? And then they throw them into the pit, and then you all climb in there, and then they seal it. Okay? And so you're sitting there in the dark, and it is immediately you're just drenched in sweat. Now for them, this is really important because they're putting out toxins, right? And that's why they do this every month. But I saw the guys that went the month before, and they had blisters on their ears when they came back. And this is when they're inviting me. Reverend Fong, you gotta come with us. I go, you were being cooked. I go, the fact that you have blisters on your ears. Like, no, we'll take care of you, Reverend Fong. I'm like, oh, okay. So I crawl in there. It is hotter than the blazes in there, right? And then they throw water. They have pails of water, and now the humidity goes up. And what you thought was a lot of sweat, now you're really drenched in sweat. You're sitting in puddles of your own sweat, and you can't even see your hand in front of your face. Okay? And then there are 3 stages. So when they call them doors. When the first door is over, they just open the hatch. So a little bit of air comes in there, right? And then everyone has a choice without being made fun of if you want to leave. Because each stage is hotter.
Oh.
Okay? Yeah, right. And so they go, anybody want to leave? And they're like, and again, no judgment. And we absolutely mean it. And then they pass around this one beacon of water, right? And you have a choice of drinking 1 sip or giving an offering of your water onto the fire.
Making it hotter.
Yeah, right. So I was like, and they really don't judge you. It's like, oh, you're so weenie, you drank it, right? No, it's like, it's totally up to you. And so it's just really interesting, all of these sensory stimulations that are going on in there. And then I was like, oh, I could say I went through 1 door, right? And then the door guy's like, Reverend Fong, we got you, man. Like, and you're just in there stripped down to your shorts. Like, it was just like, so I'm like, okay, I'll do 1 more. Close the thing, put in more rocks, like hotter than before. Then the humidity. Then it was like still deeper. And you're just supposed to meditate to whatever spirit, great spirit, right? So, I was praying to God, save me. Yeah. I'm in the fiery furnace. Oh my gosh. So again, it's the end of the second stage, and they pass the thing around. People reflecting on any epiphanies, anything, you gotta think, drink. I'm throwing my water on the fire, right? Yeah. And then it's like, I really want to leave now, and they're like, you got to go through this last stage, like, yeah. And it's like, oh, man. And so, what was really cool about that in the long run is we completely reverse positions because I'm always their teacher. And in this case, I'm completely dependent on them. And so we're sitting there in the mud of our own sweat, and I'm like crawling in the mud because you're trying to get as low as possible to keep the heat, right? And they're like, all right, so you could breathe toward the edge of the bottom of the hut, right? Because there's a little bit of air coming in there, right? Yeah. I wish I had a snorkel. So I went through all 3 doors, and then at the end, they take all the blankets off, and you're on, it's like past midnight, because we didn't get in until like 9 o'clock. And that first breath of clean air is the most amazing taste you've ever had in your life, right? But anyway, I think, and then I do their Bible statement. All right, so let's open our Bibles.
Would you say they had a religious experience?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so when we're creating a church, the foxes are the ones really left out at church, I think, and unless they're married to a beaver who takes them to church. But we don't emphasize, in my opinion, worship with spiritual, and at least not enough, as a spiritual moment a fox may have, and on top of that, like dancing or any other artistic sort of stimulation, where there's no emphasis on that for a fox. But for them, being in that hut, they did have that religious experience. Why? Because they had a stimulating experience.
Well, I wonder about the charismatic churches where they're having revival and
Right.
and speaking in tongues and all these sounds
that
and
might be it
laughing
too.
in the pit.
Right.
I wonder if that's not a stimulation
Right.
thing for more. of a
Absolutely,
Fox.
it's stimulation. But another thing with stimulation, we always talk about a low-level Fox issue. Stimulation does not always have to be what your eyes see, what your nose smells. It could also be intense decision making. So when Ken was talking about that pastor who blew up that mega church and burnt out, why? Because it's a fox. A fox likes that intense environment, not in there for the long run, can stand there for a few years and then get burnt out. So I don't know if people think of foxes as lazy. Sometimes that's some of their stereotypes. But if they are lazy, they're lazy because.
They're bored.
Huh?
They're bored.
Or they wait for a situation where they could have high intensity, and then they shine. So as a fox, we may want to put them in new situations where they can create it. A new organization. The last thing you want to do is like, oh, do you want to take over this ministry that's been going on since the beginning of the church? Here's the documents to go follow. Just here. Like you would not want a beaver in charge of the baptism committee. Like I just would not be able to wake up early in the morning, make sure it's hot enough, and then make sure they have slippers and put on the robe. Like that would kill me. But a fox too, that would destroy a fox really quickly.
Or don't assign the fox to rewrite the bylaws. Yeah, right. So going back to the prodigal son story, isn't the prodigal son a fox? Right? Man, I got plans. You're way too healthy, Dad. So I figured out your net worth, and so this is my portion, and I'm going to just spend it on what looks, in this case, hedonistic things, right? All these stimulations, and until the point where he actually became homeless. Okay. When we get into talking about the epiphanies that happen for each of our totems, I think that's an example of what does it take for a fox to actually wake up, right? And to realize that even though God still uses all of us and all of our personality totems, there are certain places where I'm brought to my knees, okay? So I think that will be interesting. Why don't we take our break right here? We'll take a 10-minute break and we'll get back. We'll start with dolphins.